Happy Friday morning, everybody. Welcome into our latest Trade to Black podcast, TDR Trade to Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales. What did you guys all think yesterday for the overall sector? We saw some nice little green. Terracin up, I think it was over 15%. So a good day for them, to say the least. But it was kind of nice to see a little bit of return to this industry. As we all know, the volume has been very light over the past couple of weeks. But speaking of return, let's welcome him back. TDR co-host, Mr. Anthony Varrell. Look who's back.
How's it going?
Back again. How was the trip?
It's good. It's good to be in Pacific Northwest. I mean, Vancouver was great. It was one thing that was eye-opening is there are barely any dispensaries there compared to Toronto in the downtown corridor. But dropped into a Canna Cabana, dropped into a Value Buds, so kind of kept everything congruent from our Toronto trip.
Uniform, like you've seen a lot of the same outline inside some of these dispensaries in out west as what you saw in Toronto?
Very different. Very different, actually. The Canna Cabana was a completely different format than we saw. I mean, it was a little bit awkward, the layout, the way that it was compared to like the Toronto store, where it was nice and big and open.
Yeah.
Obviously still had all the same products, was still sativa hybrid, indica. Value Buds was the exact same thing. Carbon copy of the store that we were in on Queen. In
Canna Cabana, their staff, as I said before, very informative, very telling, very helpful with a lot of customers that come in. But Value Buds, I like what they have too, with just a list of different products and strains, like on the boards that they have outlined. So something that I've never seen in any dispensaries that I've attended, but it was nice to see. But kudos for you going out there and checking that out. But man, oh man, a lot has happened since you were gone, and had a couple of good conversations with Eric Berlin from Dentons. We're going to be bringing him up in just a moment, but lots of stuff pertaining to rescheduling as like more of this fear mongering starts to try to implement itself, I think, for a possible delay, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But let's begin into the wire here on a Friday morning TDR's Trade to Black podcast and begin with news out of Florida. As your governor, looks like he's doubling down because hemp executives have pledged $5 million in donations to the Republican Party of Florida. As I said, looks like he's going to be doubling down. Things are really starting to heat up between hemp and adult use cannabis leading up to this election. And I think we're just getting started, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I'd obviously like to say here. But I mean, just off the top, I mean, it's kind of disgusting behavior by the governor. And I also think that he's playing the hemp industry. I think he's playing them like a fiddle for his political gain. And I mean, if they're dumb enough to get duped into that, that's on them.
Yeah.
I mean, CBS Miami uncovered text basically saying, guys, 5 million is what we need to pledge in order to get the veto passed. This is basically pay for play with the governor. What the governor doesn't understand is that he is essentially propping up a legal cannabis industry that's hiding in plain sight, that has every single ramification on public safety, on use in public.
Yeah.
Any of the counterpoints that he's making against Amendment 3 and against adult use cannabis is clearly inherent in the hemp industry, as they're selling the same products pretty much when it comes to hemp versus cannabis. Getting Amendment 3 passed in Florida with the right guardrails in place puts a safe, regulated, and tested industry in the state of Florida that will generate tax revenue and be beneficial to the state. The fact that he's doing this, I think he's duping the entire hemp industry. Granted, they are pledging that capital to the Republican Party of Florida.
Yeah.
They're not pledging that capital directly towards fighting Amendment 3. So once that money goes into the Republican Party of Florida, there isn't really a oversight of where that capital gets allocated. DeSantis is doing this to fortify his efforts to fight the abortion bill that's on there. I really do firmly believe that he is using them to beef up his efforts and to rally up the troops as, okay, I want to go attack this. So Amendment 3 is going to be collateral damage. And now I'm going to promise you X to beef up my efforts. $5 million is a decent amount of capital to be campaigning against these ballot initiatives. And I'm going to be willing to bet that the closer and closer we get to the election, you're going to see a combined effort which I believe it's 2 is the women's rights amendment, and then obviously 3 is adult use cannabis in the state of Florida.
How big is that legal hemp market in Florida? Do you know, in comparison to what the adult use cannabis could be?
Or nationwide, I've heard it's about 30 billion. So it's about the same as the legal cannabis market. If I had to guess in Florida, it's probably somewhere between 2.5 and 4 billion, and that's just a guess. But it's everywhere. I mean, it's in every smoke shop, it's in convenience stores, it's in gas stations, it's all over the place. And I mean, this is kind of like the last straw for kind of having any sort of empathy for the hemp industry. If they're going to go knives out, conspire with the governor to take down adult use cannabis in the state of Florida, they're not any friend of mine. They're not any friend of anybody's really watching this show. And I mean, I'm going to do what I can to support the Miller Amendment and to support rolling back the regulations within the hemp industry. That's simply a loophole that's leveraging the farm bill that was put in place to stimulate industrial hemp, which never included intoxicating hemp products within that legislation the way it was rolled out.
Yeah, about to get into that, but looks like 2 behemoth industries about to go head to head against each other. But, you know, as we've said, this is going to get very political and we're just getting started. Okay, topic number 2, and keeping, we want to focus now on Washington. It was reported yesterday by Marijuana Moment that Republicans in Congress sent a public comment letter this week opposing the Biden's administration planned rescheduling of marijuana. The letter was led by Republican Pete Sessions and Senator James Lankford. In this letter, like, what exactly did you see that they're opposing?
Everything. They're opposing the processes that the HHS used. They're approaching the methods that were used. They're approaching everything that justifies Schedule 3, which, if you really want to just mic drop it, I would go to them and say, gentlemen, please give me any data, scientific evidence, or rational logic that justifies cannabis originally being on Schedule 1 and continuing to be on Schedule 1.
Yeah.
Because they can't. Nobody can.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be there. That is the fact of the matter. This is just prohibitionists at work. It's 25 House members. It's 25 congressmen and senators. There's 535 of them in the government. So this is 5% that is signing on against cannabis. 95% aren't against cannabis. I'm going to play the numbers game and stay on the side that I'm on and kind of just say that this is cannon fodder. And it's really nothing that we should be worried about. This is just Sessions being Sessions, Lankford being Lankford. They're not going to go away. And I mean, this is expected.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this last week with Eric Berlin from Dentons, that the drama is just getting started. So let's welcome him back to the podcast. Good Friday morning, sir. How are you? I think you're on mute, Eric. Sorry about that.
Good Friday morning to
there
both
you
of
are.
you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me back on. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk with you again.
Well, great podcast last week with both you and Darren Weiss, and learned a lot just about this whole delay process and how we should anticipate more and more drama and stories unfolding. And there's no shortage of this. Like, I can't believe the amount of stuff that's been spread since the last time that you were on 9 days ago. But what do you make, I guess, of some of the stories that were released earlier this week? I think a lot of people that are following this space, they don't lose an ounce of sleep, but we are in the midst of a lot of fear-mongering stories, as you've kind of alluded to, right?
So yes. And I kind of was on last time and we addressed some issues and I think calmed some folks down. And here we are a week later. And there are new things that are stirring things up. So let me take a moment to address what actually has occurred and what that likely means. So first of all, the House Appropriations Committee that covers commerce, justice, science, and related agencies, or CJS, we refer to them as, they passed a amendment that would be in the spending bill. And we'll talk about rural Rocker Farr in a second, but it was an amendment in the spending bill through a committee chaired by Tom Cole that said, DOJ, you are not allowed to use any of this money to reschedule cannabis.
Okay.
To do their job that the president asked them to do. That happened. That, you know, it's all politics. To call something politics, I mean, it's meant to be politics. In some ways, that's a good thing. It's a bad thing. But the bottom line is that amendment is not likely to have 60 votes in the Senate, which it needs. I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking about all the positive things that are happening in the Senate.
Yeah.
Bills that are being filed for full legalization, safer banking. That's not the direction the Senate's going in. So I don't think that amendment really has any chance. And I can tell you that it has no chance this year because the spending bill is just not going to get done, in my opinion. Now, I want to be clear. I'm a lawyer, not a politician, or not, you know, I don't want to speculate or say what is going to happen or how things are going to be. But I have significant doubts that anything that language like that would live through the Senate. The additional thing that happened, and I'll come back to that in a second. The additional thing that happened in that committee is a slight change to what we've all referred to as Rohrabacher-Farr. And to be clear for everyone, that is the amendment to the spending bill that says, DOJ, here's your money, but you may not use any of these funds to interfere with the state medical cannabis programs. Okay. Federal courts have interpreted that to mean that the DOJ may not bring any action against anyone who is in strict compliance with medical cannabis programs, and the DOJ has stood back. The committee did not change that underlying language. The committee, again, and it has many times in the past, rejected language that would expand Rohrabacher-Farr to apply not just to medical, but to anyone who's in strict compliance with state cannabis laws, including adult use. I'll come back in a moment to the rejection of that. But what did get added was language to permit the enforcement of 21 USC Section 860. And which basically what that permits is a prosecution against anyone who is selling an illegal controlled substance within 1,000 feet of a school or a daycare center or something like that. And here's the deal with that. It's in many ways politically difficult to oppose that. It's interesting that that's what our opponents chose to put in the bill with the purpose of degrading it a bit, right?
That's all that was. That's all
that
was.
Like most citizens would say, yeah, that seems okay that they're like, they haven't lived through the ordinance and local wars that we have. But it seems reasonable to folks. Well, but I have concerns even with that because it's a slippery slope.
Why is that?
Why is that? Because first of all, this is being well regulated by the states. You know, all the states already have their laws as to how far you need to be from a daycare center, school, church. I learned in the recent past that children going to church are able to fly like the crows to dispensaries. So it doesn't matter how far away they are on the road. It matters how far away they are on the map, because apparently church-going children can fly. Eric, so, I mean, these are issues the states have dealt with, and it's been dealt with I joke about that, and it's dealt with on the local level in the sense that churches, daycare centers, schools are saying, and parents are saying, and people are voting and having a say on the state level as to what their state program should look like. And almost all of them have very significant setbacks against schools. It's not the state legal cannabis industry that's selling anything near schools. It's hemp stores and it's illegal stores in New York. That shouldn't be a congressional issue, quite frankly. Now, let me turn back to that just for a second, because they rejected the expansion to adult use. Republican Representative Dave Joyce voted for the expansion of Rohrabacher-Farr. And he's someone who recognizes where the citizens' will is pointing this industry,
Yeah.
and favors the rule of law. So folks who say, oh, well, we don't want rescheduling. We don't want any sense of state legalization. I mean, in the end, we know that cannabis exists. All we're trying to do is institute the rule of law. So there, and by the way, it's not just for the sake of the rule of law. Where you have the rule of law, you can have commerce, right? I mean, people don't do business in certain countries because there's not the rule of law, and you can't go and have contracts that you can enforce, and all these things. All these things are, all those notions of the rule of law and stability is what this industry needs. And I don't understand folks who stand in the way of the rule of law or affirmatively anti-rule of law in many ways. So I'll just make that, without going further, that political comment. But so I thank Dave Joyce on that. But let me make actually one quick. So I want to make it political. I'm gonna comment on something, which is it's so important for all of us to be well educated and far more unified than the industry is. And one example is Representative of Rohrabacher Farr saying, let scheduling take its, we're in the middle of rescheduling. Let that happen. Let's not mess with this further. Let's just let rescheduling happen, and that's the rule of law. Yet he wasn't disclosing at the same time he voted for the amendment that would preclude the DOJ from rescheduling.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's really important that we understand what these amendments are doing, who's on them, why they're doing them. At the same time, it's also important to understand neither the ones we've just discussed are likely to become law this year, for example.
Yeah. Well, I think if anything, what's really impressive about the industry right now on the legal side is that a lot of these, statements that are being outlined that are so far from the truth right now, I think we're well prepared, and we have been well prepared for a number of years to answer a lot of this stuff, to give factual information of what the data is showing. I was even reading actually yesterday out of Colorado that since they legalized adult use back in 2014, it's actually tougher for people underage to have access to cannabis. So a lot of the, the data that is showing, I think there's plenty of information for us to back up. And really, we're at the calling stage right now of whether or not we get rescheduling. But a lot of the stuff and these proclaims of like what's actually happening is so far from the truth. But, I think one thing that I did want to outline too is that, look, last time that you were on, we understand this is all about a delay process to maybe have a better chance of getting rescheduling decline with the Trump administration. And you were basically saying that it wouldn't have a leg to stand on, in court, just because they've had plenty of time to basically review a lot of this stuff. So what happens then? How does this play out? Like when it comes to these requested hearings, like, do you have an idea as to if and when they will be denied? Like, how does that all work?
So there are various requests right now. There is a request for lengthening the time for comment.
Okay.
There is a request for a hearing. There are multiple parties have made requests for a hearing. You need to be a true interested party to get a hearing, right? Anyone can make a comment. You need to be an actual interested, potentially adversely affected party. So no, I've said that before. I don't think just because you believe in something, you have standing for a hearing or for anything thereafter. That's my opinion. I could understand that certain judges may or may not disagree with that.
Yeah.
So. But that's my view on that. But at the same time, that particular organization may not have legal standing for lawsuits, but they are supplying the language that we're seeing, right? And you just spoke about the hemp bill, and we had spoken about the amendment that was put in, and then that same language got teed up for appropriations, and that's straight out of that advocacy group. And so, they're having a role, and I would contend we need to be better organized and vociferous in in just what you said, and in articulating what we know, and putting the science forward, and continuing to make the good arguments that support the
so you think we
legalization of
need to be
cannabis.
you think we need to be better then?
I think we need to be way better. I don't say that in criticism of my colleagues who are working so hard in that direction. I say that in criticism of the entire industry and anyone who has an interest in this. I think for too long, people have just assumed it was going to happen. Let me answer, if I can I know you, I'm already over. Let me address that really directly, which is, when I started, on this over 15 years ago, the general assumption was that it was a fool's errand. Like, even getting medical cannabis done in Illinois, I was wasting my time. It was never going to happen. And I could barely even talk about it. Like elevator talk, it's like people would be freaked out. Is it illegal for me to even talk to you about it? Right? I mean, that's the world we lived in. Then, by the time we got to 2018, despite the election of Trump, recall that 8 out of 9 states legalized during that election. And everyone said, it's now a matter not of if we'll have legalization, but when we'll have legalization.
Yeah.
And when they said that, they left out the critically important point of how will we have legalization and what will that look like? And so what I've seen is, actually, interestingly, and I don't want anyone to attribute anything too great to it, doesn't mean they're going to be successful. I actually see right now greater opposition to legalization than I did 8 years ago. And I see it louder. And I find that really interesting because, I think in some ways the industry fell asleep at the switch, assuming it was going to happen. And a lot more work is required to make it happen. And I have some concerns, not that viewpoint will become the majority viewpoint on cannabis. I have some concerns that cannabis will get kind of caught up in some law and order, reverse the administrative state efforts. And we'll already see the comments on certain media that the cities are lawless and smell. And the smell is code for various things, right? And so I think it's really important. And so to answer your question, I think the industry needs to be doing at least 10 times more than it's doing to come together to oppose these sort of viewpoints. We should have videos that are going out of patient testimonials. We should have places you can access the data where citizens can, get these questions themselves answered. Is cannabis dangerous? Here you go. And in terms of our approach to all these officials, we need to be, in my humble opinion, this isn't Dentons Cannabis. This is just me as a person. I think we need to be doing a lot more to support someone like Dave Joyce, and a lot more to oppose the politicians who are standing in the way, and let their citizens know really what's happening here. And they're standing in the way of what citizens in general want, and law and order being imposed on that.
Well said. You gave me a great idea. Go ahead, Anthony. I know there's a lot of things you wanted to talk about.
I was going to say, Eric, you're considered a thought leader in the space. And you've worked with a lot of the larger companies in the space. And having the opinion that we can be doing more, maybe even, let's say, 10x what we're doing today. This is a $30 billion industry with a lot of human capital inside of it. Why aren't the companies and the industry at large doing more? If it's kind of standing there right in front of us, we all know it, but no one's really passing the buck.
So interesting you said that in light of your comments earlier about Florida, because it's really at least a $60 billion industry. And much more than that. Legal and the notion that we just look at like one method of going to market. We know what the demand is, right? Yeah. And it's a matter of and the current state is not ideal.
Yeah.
Right. The current state of, you have state by state on both cannabis and hemp, and none of them are the same. You essentially have, there's some states that have complete prohibition, but among all our states and district and territories, we have like, 90 different laws on cannabis and hemp. And there's competition and there's fighting and there's all that sort of thing. But the bottom line is, in terms of the demand for cannabinoids, it's like $100 billion industry. And that's what we're eventually going to have. I mean, the notion that we're going to continue like this in 30 years from now is going to look like this, right? I mean, it's silly. We all know that. And so folks need to be coming together more in unison. And the whole notion of, we're going to accept what the states have imposed on us very artificially with a lot of ignorance. And I was part of that, I take for some responsibility of these really constrained state cannabis programs. They are, you mentioned, some of my clients, they're doing their very level best to go to market in the best and most responsible way that you can, except the government has made it so difficult for them. Wow. Any dispensary experience in the United States is generally not ideal, right? It's not how you want consumers to come in and purchase your product. And having someone taking cards at the door is one thing, and having everyone under video, the whole thing is different and less good and far more expensive. And I don't agree with the notion that all cannabis, any intoxicating cannabis product, should have to go through all of those regulations. I think that we should be meeting somewhere in between, right? I don't think that we should have intoxicating cannabis products at every convenience store. We're not, I'm not there yet. Maybe I'm wrong on that opinion, but I'm not there yet. But I do think that we should have greater, safe, legal, affordable access than we have through the state regulated and taxed cannabis programs. And I think that they should have more level set regulations that can exist on lots of levels. And quite frankly, any intoxicating cannabinoid products could go through that, and everyone would be on a level playing field, and it would be $100 billion industry. And so when you look at it from that perspective, we are massively under represented in how we're going to Congress and not unified in message.
You know what, Anthony? We got to get back to Washington.
We're going in September now, or sooner than that, maybe.
This all makes sense. I think the biggest
thing, easier said than done. Can I just add that? Like, that's one man's opinion. And I really want to be careful because it's very complicated.
Yeah, but Eric, I will say,
doing their level best,
We went to Washington in April, and it was just like the first time, I think, and I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back, but it was badly needed as some of the video content that was being produced on conversations you're having in hearings on the streets with different congressmen, congresswomen, different senators, but at the same time too, just really pushing forward, like some of these medical stories that are being taking place in various states across the country. But those are the types of conversations that absolutely, you need to come up with like 100 to 200 people one day and just show up and say, tell your story, talk to these people, have a conversation with them, hear what they have to say. That's it. But
it is what has moved folks historically. I mean, state by state, what's moved folks are ballot initiatives and patient testimonials before voting members of the General Assembly or the or whatever the state government is.
Well, you brought up back in the day when you first got started 15 years ago about the medical market in Illinois, and it was just reported yesterday that they just did over $1 billion in revenue in adult use. Fastest they've done this actually previous to last year, 2023. So, as much as we need to keep going, we got to look at it as well and see how much progress that we've made. So a conversation you were afraid of actually starting 15 years ago, and there's a market that just did $1 billion in the first 6 months of 2024. So onwards and upwards. But listen, always great connecting with you. This has been very, very helpful. I hope our audience got a better idea. And I think the biggest thing that we really wanted to understand next is look, we understand the delay process that these anti-legalization groups are trying to achieve, but what comes next? when do these hearings actually get declined or at least reviewed? And I think you kind of outlined that and touched on that. So appreciate obviously all the feedback.
It's great talking with you, and thank you for having me on. I realized I took way more time than you wanted.
No, this is great though. It's great.
So really nice to speak to you. I'll let you guys go, and I hope you all and all your viewers have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. Let's keep in touch, okay?
You bet. All
right, thanks, Eric. Wow, learned a lot there, didn't you?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, Eric's always very informative. I mean, it's a little frustrating when he puts it like that we should be doing maybe 10x what we're doing right now. I mean, let's be honest, like a lot of the companies that are in all of the companies in the industry, I mean, their financial well-being as well as just their existence is affected by this legislation and really what happens. So, I mean, seeing a greater concerted effort across the board would be more than ideal.
Well, I look at the Smart and Safe program that Kim's doing, and she's put in a great effort towards that. And I know there's a lot of other companies that have funded towards that program, which is great too. But maybe there's something I don't know or I'm not aware of. But shouldn't all these companies be that same kind of effort and getting their faces out there more so than just Kim? Yes, she has the biggest reward in Florida, but you know, at the end of the day, like she's created her own success by building out a great model and expanding on dispensaries. So I don't know, like if you're in whatever market that you're in, like what are we actually doing to get the message pushing forward more and more? But the more I learn about this space, I realize, wow, as much as we've made a ton of progress, there's so much more stuff that we have to do and do better.
Very much so.
Yeah. All right. Into the wire. Let's now bring in our good friend Guap. Good to see you, sir. I'm sure that you thought that was interesting to say the least.
Yeah, I love having Eric on TDR legal counsel. Not legal advice, but especially when he was speaking from the heart there at the end about he basically described my fantasy, which is to create playlists based on demographics. So get 10 veteran testimonials, 10 grandmas, 10 cancer patients, 10, and just create this YouTube playlist. Yeah. And then essentially where the fantasy comes in is sort of a scene out of Clockwork Orange, like, you know, toothpicks in the eyelids, and make Congress watch this and re-examine their perspective and stance on cannabis.
Well, the light went off and I had a conversation with them. There's all kinds of ideas that we're going to start implementing, gents, when it comes to content. Into the wire. Last topic I want to bring up involves Washington once again, where it appears Congress can actually reschedule cannabis at a greater speed and flexibility. In a report on Tuesday, the CRS discussed various options through which rescheduling actions can be implemented. Past scheduling actions have been implemented by the DEA, but it appears, Anthony, Congress is now stepping in, what are the reasons? Like, why is this being decided to reschedule cannabis?
Please let me have this one, Chad.
Go ahead, my friend.
This is just, I bring it up. It's coming up in the Guap segment because there's kind of a humor angle to this. So according to the Congressional Research Service, Congress can reschedule cannabis quicker with less of a chance of a legal challenge. We're 10 days from the comment period ending, seeing if there's going to be hearings, and then it's going to get signed into law most likely. So it's just hilarious. It's like they took all the time, you know, according to Congress can reschedule this quicker. Really? What have you done quickly in the last, I don't know, few decades? So it's funny. It's just, like, cancel it. Don't worry, guys. Congress has got it. It's laughable.
It's funny at the 11th hour, like the amount of opposing efforts that are taking place towards a lot of this stuff is more so now than what it was a number of years ago. But look, if you start knocking on doors and continue to have conversations, you're not going away. They suddenly, obviously, I look at this as like, look, they've got their attention. Yes, we could be doing more, but I think this is obviously why a lot of this stuff is happening at the 11th hour right now. But
so, I mean, I think there's also another way you could think about it. And I mean, I might be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure I'm on base. This is kind of our ace in the hole if Trump goes into office and just decides to destroy rescheduling and the Democrats do keep the House. This is that lever they can pull to just push it through if they need to. That being said, I don't want to bring up everyone's favorite term, safe banking, but Chuck's been able to pass that for some time now, and we're still here.
I know.
So, I mean, I wouldn't be counting on any of the legislative bodies of government actually getting anything done. But it is nice to know that and I don't think Trump is actually going to do this if he does get into office, but if they do go in there and dismantle everything, a congressional act can rectify the wrong in the event that happened. But I don't think that that's going to happen.
And that was always true. It's just they're reminding us that Congress could have done something about this, I don't know, 4 years ago.
Yeah. And then you still got to worry about the Senate. And I don't want anything to be legislative, to be completely honest. Nothing cannabis related is going to get done legislatively. Honestly, it screams to me, not of desperation, but just this feeling that their authority and power and respect amongst the American people and the government as being the least effective branch of government. Yeah. And them sort of like, well, we could have done it quicker. It's like, it sounds, sorry to change my voice there, but it sounds whiny, right? Like, it's kind of like, guys, shut up. Yeah.
3 is where it's at today because no level
going.
Yeah.
Happy's exactly.
You're right.
Exactly correct.
Yeah. R39838, don't your source say it's a lock? Yes, they pretty much are saying this is a lock. We're just bringing some of this stuff up. Joe Griesler, Congress won't do shit. Yes. Emilio Mangual writes, TDR, please contact CNN, Fox News. Let them know U.S. citizens still waiting Biden cannabis decriminalization. Yes, we actually are reaching out to Fox Business News. Humor Man writes, can you give a rough overview which steps will take place after the comment period, how long each step will last, and the day there will be rescheduling? We cannot.
No, we can't because nobody knows.
Right.
Well, I mean, there's sort of things that could happen or could not happen. What we're hearing from Eric and people like Shane Pennington is that the idea that there might not be hearings. This could be signed into law sooner than September. It could happen. It could all wrap up pretty quick here. So we're sort of in wait and see mode right now. But anyone who has tried to predict when anything in cannabis legislation land will happen has been wrong. Or cannabis in general. Thank goodness this isn't a decision that Congress is making.
Yeah. Coming up, we have Mic Drop with Guap, as usual, on every single Friday. This is the TDR Trade to Black podcast, Guap with Anthony Varrell, along with myself. Guys, we'll bring you guys back on. We're now going to segue over to our lead financial writer and analyst, Bill McNarland, as we get inch closer and closer to earnings season. How are you, sir? Good Friday.
Yeah, great to be here. Always excited to be on the big show. It's like playing hockey in the minors and you get the call up and it's been 2 weeks in a row.
Well said. How's the Calgary Stampede doing? Is it doing great out there? Or what?
I got rid of that about 5 or 6 days ago. I assume it's still going on and I no longer had any time for it.
Yeah, I know you attended a couple of Bloomberg events that was out there during that event too, but I know you're a well-connected person with many analysts across the country, and you continue to produce a lot of great earnings report stories and leading up to earnings season. But one thing I wanted to highlight today was a story that you did earlier this week, that if there was one metric an analyst you could pick from, as far as one metric an analyst would pick from regarding earnings season, the number one thing that you outlined was levered free cash flow margins. Do you want to explain a little bit more into detail as to why that is and what your story included?
Yeah, we don't hear a lot of people talk about that, but it's a favorite of mine. And it's similar to just running, the budget for a family or a small business or a public company. You're concerned about the cash that you have at the end of the month or the end of the quarter if you're a public company. And this includes things, if you want to put new siding on your house because it's creating value, that's great. It's probably going to add value to your house, but it's draining your bank account. So you still have to be mindful of the cash. And so that's why I love looking at this for public companies. And a trend that I've noticed is that in the last 6 months, the majority of the MSOs have went into positive cash flow.
Right.
And this includes after they make their debt payments, after they pay their taxes, after also they spend money on capital expenditures. So this is something very intriguing because it de-risks the companies. And it's great because this extra cash flow, they can do things like spend more on capital expenditures, pay down debt, or even buy back some shares. So this is something that I'm watching. how this trend is and how the companies are improving. And even though it's not in the press releases for the companies and earnings, we're going to spend time calculating it for our readers.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more about some of these stories that you're pumping out, make sure QR code at the bottom here that you log on to thedalesreport.com or click on the QR code here and subscribe to our Baked In newsletter. Another thing I wanted to highlight too, and we do this on our Small Cap Sunday podcast, 8 o'clock on Sunday nights. Right now, you're noticing that cannabis stocks are outperforming the bulk of small cap stocks financially, so fundamentally sound. Obviously the market's not seeing that right now. I think that's the case with a lot of the small cap environment, but from, like you said, a fundamental wise, in business wise, as they become cash flow positive, they are financially outperforming the bulk of small cap stocks into the overall ecosystem.
Yeah, so I'll explain my reasoning on that. So we have the show Small Cap Sunday. We're looking for 3 quality small cap names, one week one, and then we add a cannabis company. For me to get to 3 quality names that I'm interested in, typically I look at about 100 small cap companies a week. And I just go through them in alphabetical order. And that's why maybe people have noticed that most of the companies we talk about start with the letter A currently. And I just go one by one through them. But I have to look at 100 companies typically to get to 3 quality ones. And the main reason that the 97 are discarded is because they don't have revenue. They don't have a plan for revenue. If they have revenue, typically they're not in a position for positive cash flow, so they have a burn rate. Typically, they don't have enough working capital, and you can't see things materializing in a short period of time that would de-risk the companies.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting. If I came across a cannabis company, the majority of the MSOs, they would make the top 3% of the cut of the small cap names. So this tells me that the cannabis MSOs are doing a lot better than the majority of small and micro cap companies.
Yeah, gone are the days of startup. We're now in mature growth stage for a lot of these companies, right?
Absolutely. That's what positive cash flow is. That's when you transition from a growth company concerned about your burn rate to a mature growth company.
All right, Sunday night, 8 o'clock. We're talking about a company, a precious metals company. We also compared 2 biotech companies, one that you should consider owning and one you should not consider owning. As well, we look at Cureleaf, one of the multi-state operators. We do a big check and walk through that experiment like we usually do, which is 7 questions on the valuation and whether or not you would own that stock. But Sunday nights, 8 o'clock. And as well, you initiated coverage this week on Jushi, correct?
Yeah, so that right now, I'm done the report. We're just doing the graphics on it, and that should be out in the next 24 hours. It'll be loaded on the website.
All right. Good seeing you every Friday, and look forward to seeing you Sunday night, sir.
Take care.
All right. Thanks, Bill. All right. Well, welcome back in, Anthony. And I thought that was interesting in Guap. Oh, here we are. But did you guys see that? He reviews 100 companies each week, and out of the 100, he finds 3 that are actually legit. Gives you an idea of what the small cap environment is. So again, people, you know, as much as we want to get rich fast, make sure you know what's on sale and what's a trap. But Bill does a great job based on that research. But let's now segue into our final segment here in the podcast here today. Do we have the music up, Barnes? Let's cue the music.
It's all good. It's in my head.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Friday afternoon. Actually, Friday morning. It's time for the greatest time of the week. Drum roll. It's mic drop with Guap. Yeah.
Yes.
Here's Guap.
Greetings, Earthlings. This is an extended plug for the Huberman podcast with Dr. Matt Hill.
Great, by the way.
Yeah, both Anthony and I listened to all 4 hours of that, and it's a must listen. Just, you know, take a long ride and listen to it, because anyone in this space should be up to speed on the current state of things in the science community. The overall takeaway is we need more research. There were multiple times where he said, yes, we've heard small studies, not double-blind placebo, but anecdotally that there's some evidence there, but we need more research.
Yeah.
Guess what solves that? Right? Guess what opens that up? So this is why I'm excited for, 3 spot, Schedule 3. he goes into things like explaining the endocannabinoid system. My eyes kind of glazed over as
I thought that was the most interesting part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was neuroscience. It was neuroscience 101, but it was great.
Yeah. Dispelled the whole idea that it's all sort of dopamine that's flooding the system, which was good to hear and get that, because you may recall that he had another podcast on cannabis without Dr. Matt Hill, and he got absolutely blown up on Twitter for some of the myths that he was putting out there. So, he tackles cannabis use disorder versus addiction, the psychosis issue, but I wanted to focus on a few nuggets that I found particularly interesting, including the bit about self-regulation. So he said when inhaling cannabis, this goes to the point where, back in the 70s, cannabis was maybe 6-7% THC, and today you can get 25%, 30 maybe. And he was saying, and so a lot of groups like Sam use that to say, look, it's so much stronger. It's affecting people so much more. And he said essentially that humans are really good at self-regulating how much actually goes into their bloodstream. So maybe they rolled and smoked the entire joint back in the 70s in my dad's day, but today I'm a 1-2 puff hero. And basically the parts per million in the blood are the same. This does not apply to edibles and concentrates. Concentrates, you can take a dab and really flood your system. Edibles, you can do the classic mistake of have some, it's not hitting yet, and eat some more. You can make that mistake. But smoking and inhalation or vaping, dry herb vape, very good at self-regulating. The other part was about the munchies. I found really interesting. He said that science shows that essentially cannabis can suppress any sort of signal that you are satiated. So it's less about stimulating appetite. It's more about blocking the chemical that says you're satiated. So that's why people tend to gorge themselves on fatty and high carb foods, because not realizing. So they demonstrated this in animals, that they could basically feed the rats, hit them with a controlled dose of cannabis, and then they would actually eat more, even though they're very full.
Gotcha.
The other bit, and I'll leave you with this, is about cultivar or strain specific effects. So, Huberman was way off with the classifying indica versus sativa, and the sort of like stuff we heard 10 years ago about indicas make you sleepy and sativas have these uplifting effects. Matt Hill wants more research done on this, but essentially attributed a lot of it to expectancy bias, which is the idea that if the bud tender or right, okay.
No, I'm laughing at Shad because I know what Shad was just looking at.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait, am I off on this?
It has nothing to do with you.
What's
no.
Oh, I see. Yes. No, I'm
It's nothing to do with you.
I saw Shad. I'm reading the comments as well. I will do my best to address Anthony's sexy ass suit at the end of this show.
Sweet, not suit.
Oh, the sweet, yeah. So it's true. Forget it. Forget mic drops over.
Nice.
We're talking about dying.
I'm sorry, Guap.
No, it's okay. Look, when someone's talking about how sexy we are, we have to bring it up.
Is that a custom-made suite?
I saw Shad's face. I couldn't.
It wasn't our Armani suite back in the day.
I was trying to stop laughing.
Yeah. Anyway, it was basically saying, look, the entourage effect is probably real. There's a lot of minor cannabinoids, terpenes, a lot of things going on. It's also why I'm such a big proponent of the whole plant, right? I want to take the buds, put it in my dryer vaporizer, and take in everything that's good about cannabis rather than trying to distill it down.
There you go.
Sponsored by the Venti.
Yeah, right.
You can get yours on storesofbickle.com.
Yes, exactly.
That's good.
Yeah, please use promo code Anthony for that. I mean, it's just
ooh,
it's an entourage effect. It needs to be studied more, but a lot of what people could be, this is what he was suggesting. Could be feeling, could be more about what they're expecting based on what the packaging says, or what the bud tender says, or what their friend says, and that's always a factor. So I actually have some studies, or some double-blind placebos that I'd love to run that just focus on packaging, taking the same cultivar, putting it in 2 different packages, and recording everyone's primary effect. I think it has a lot to do with how your body's feeling at that moment, right? If you're gearing up to do some yard work and you take some cannabis, you may feel energized. If it's 8 o'clock at night and you didn't sleep well the night before, I think cannabis is going to help you sleep. And then I'm talking about the same cultivar. So that's me and my anecdotal evidence. But the big takeaway here is we need more research done.
Yep. So all in all, though, it was a positive outlook. Was that the big takeaway, you guys? I didn't get a chance to listen to it.
I think my biggest takeaway from it is the fact that we're actually going to be able to get that level of research in the US thanks to Schedule 3 moving forward. Because as a caveat, the neuroscientist, I think it was Kevin Hill, that was on I might have butchered his first name, but I'm pretty sure that was his name. He was Canadian. Obviously, cannabis is legal in Canada. This kind of research is able to be conducted. Schedule 3 is going to allow the gloves to come off and for them to actually conduct this type of research on cannabinoids moving forward, which is great.
Okay. Daniel Davis got some good feedback right now. Also, lots of PA updates floating around Twitter today. Governor calling for September, also struck 280E from the budget. Not sure if that was covered earlier. Interesting.
I'll look for that right as we get off this.
Yeah. Also, I noticed Drew Dilkins earlier talked about just the climb that Terracin had yesterday. I want to highlight that as well. As we said actually in our newsletter that we had some nice green, which you indicated, Anthony, was nice to see. But let's hope we can continue that trend, because I think one day this week, I think there was less than 2 million trading volume amongst the top four MSOs. So it's quiet right now, but I'm not surprised. It's July. Gents, good podcast here today. Enjoy the rest of your day. And Monday, we are back at it, looking to possibly set up a podcast with John Hartman from Ascend, possibly next week. And then we will have one thing I want to highlight too. And Dan, the chart man from the Chart Guys, actually outlined this for me to highlight. Was story of the week on the charts. MindMed, he announced last week about holding their $7 base like they were watching for, and indeed it held. So rumors about whether or not the FDA approves Lykos's drug, that's going to come out in the next couple of weeks. And who knows where that sits right now. I'm hearing a lot where it's 50-50, but MindMed, great IP that they have right now. And we don't really talk a lot about the psychedelic space all that much recently, but that is definitely one stock that I would still keep an eye on. But kudos to Dan for basically feeding that information over to us. Gents, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you back here Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock.
Talk soon, everybody.
Nice, sweet.
Separate stoner science from real science, folks.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching our latest podcast. Lots of momentum building. You guys getting all excited? Leave comments below. Again, we want to take this viral. Smash that like button and make sure to click on that bell for all notifications as we start to bring on bigger and bigger guests. Don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, the Baked In newsletter, by logging on to thedalesreport.com. And we want to take this viral, as I said, and make this community grow. So make sure to subscribe on that channel, because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.